What up, what up, what up? I hope all is well. Braids in the way. I hope all is well. I hope all is well. What's up, what's up? I know we're on a different day, but we are here. I had a few requests for this day since I had to change the day. So I hope this works for everyone this week, but always the playback will be available. And I'm getting everything pulled up here. I hope your long weekend was fruitful and amazing. I know mine was. I had family in town. So I hope that all is well. Let me get my stuff pulled up here and give people some time to come in. And if not, that's okay. Like I said, everything will be recorded. And give myself some time here to pull this up. And yeah, I'm super excited. I'm glad that we're able to talk about affirmations surrounding our emotions and our feelings. This is part 2. So we did start with part 1, I want to say 2 weeks ago. Just kind of initially talking about our emotions and our feelings and understanding that we may only verbally discuss a certain amount of emotions, but there are a plethora of emotions that you may be experiencing, and you may be experiencing one or 2 or 3 or 4 emotions at the same time, but group it all together to like one emotion. So that was a great conversation that we had the last time. Make sure to, if you haven't watched that, to go back and watch the first one for part 1. I actually linked it down in the comments. So yeah, make sure to go back and watch that if you haven't already. So with talking about emotions and the basis of them, right? And talking about the fact that we have those 6 core emotions. So the 6 core emotions that we covered in the last one was sadness, joy, anger, fear, peace, and faith. And how all of our other emotions are connected to those 6 core emotions. So definitely go back and listen to that one or watch that one. And then I gave 6 affirmations to go along with that. So make sure to go back and watch that. Now, when going to part 2, I want to explore emotions even further, but specifically talking about how our thoughts impact our emotions. So just in therapy theory and certain therapy theories, it talks about how emotions and behaviors and thoughts are interchangeable and they affect each other. So we talked about how our emotions are basically triggered. We talked about the different types of emotions, but now we can talk about how our thoughts affect our emotions and why they impact them in that way. So I have 6 more affirmations surrounding that, talking about how the thoughts and what we're thinking and why they are important. So I want to give you a little bit of a overview of that before I dive into the affirmations, so that way they all make sense. Again, if this is your first time, my name is Debbie. I'm a certified meditation coach. If you have listened to any of my meditations, I'm the voice that you hear. Again, certified as a mindfulness and meditation coach, but also in graduate school to become a therapist. So you'll hear me talk about all of that in these videos. But primarily these lives are specific to talking and walking through affirmations based off of different topics. So today we're talking about understanding our feelings And with it being Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought this would be a good topic. I see Azariah. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Yes, you can have a shout out, of course. But outside of a shout out, I hope you're receiving everything that's being taught today or talked about today in regards to emotions. So if you this is a very interactive live. If you have questions, if you want to have me repeat anything or don't understand anything, and you want to like just ask a question, feel free to do so. And feel free to interrupt me with any questions. So diving into, and again, this is a part 2. So if you haven't watched part 1, feel free to go back and watch part 1. It's linked in the comments. Linked in the bio. Awesome. So when it comes to our emotions, they are affected by our thoughts. Our thoughts affect our emotions affect our behaviors affect our emotions, and our emotions affect our thoughts. It goes around in a circle, and they're all interchangeable, so they all affect each other. So if one's out of whack, then everything else is out of whack. So being able to focus on those different areas and understanding what thoughts are impacting your emotions the worst, what emotions are impacting your behaviors the most or the worst, and then vice versa. So that's one thing that I want you all to understand, that concept is where all of this is coming from, right? So thoughts can trigger emotions, and emotions trigger our thoughts. The next thing I want you to understand is our thoughts play a crucial role in our perceptions, right? So our perceptions can trigger emotions and false truths. Where do false truths come from? What we're entertaining the most in our minds, right? It comes from our trauma, it comes from our past experiences, it comes from our expectations and what we have seen people do and what we've seen environments, like what those outcomes can be. So based off of that, that's how we perceive the world. And sometimes in those perceptions, it can skew how we're thinking, and then therefore skew our thoughts, skew what we're thinking, and then therefore skew our emotions, and then also skew our behaviors, because then we start acting off of our perceptions versus us acting off of reality, right? So that's the second point I want you to understand. The third thing I want you to understand is how we frame our thoughts dictates our emotions. So our core values, our beliefs, our expectations are what's going to actually frame our thoughts, which then frame our emotions. So take that in consideration when thinking about how you're feeling, why you're feeling those different emotions, and how often you're feeling those emotions. So if you ultimately have a lot of emotions, that you feel a lot of things at one time, that could say one thing. Or if you're not feeling anything. I know we're talking about feelings of emotions and us, processing all of these emotions. Sometimes we're operating on autopilot. Sometimes we're not feeling anything, and that's a frustration. So just thinking about all of that when it comes to how we're framing our thoughts and our perceptions. And then 2 more points I wanted to make is self-talk. How we are speaking to ourselves directly impacts our feelings and emotions, right? So if our internal dialogue is heavily skewed to the negative side, then that's going to dictate what your emotions are going to be. Your emotions are going to be skewed to the negative. Your behaviors are going to be skewed to the negative. So it all starts with up here, right? How we're thinking, what we're thinking, why we're thinking the things that we're thinking will always trickle into how we're feeling, and then therefore trickle into how we're behaving. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, dwelling on thoughts and emotions can have a positive or negative outcome. Sometimes we have a lot of negative emotions and negative behaviors because we're dwelling primarily on our negative thoughts. We're entertaining our negative thoughts to the point where that's overriding our positives. And then from there, it just kind of has a trickle effect, like I was talking about before. As you all know, or should know, I don't know, based off of how often you guys listen into my channel, I am a believer. So Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think of such things. I think that that is truly important, because if we're dwelling on the negative, that's what's going to spill out of us. If we're dwelling on what should have been or what could have been, or in all of those past negative thoughts that we have about, the feedback that we give ourselves internally, if we dwell on that consistently, and that's our primary thought, and that's in the forefront all of the time, then that's what's going to pour out when it comes to our emotions, as well as what pours out when it comes to our behaviors. So I wanted to go through that because I could give you these affirmations all day, but without context, it really doesn't, it's really not going to give you what you're looking for. So I wanted to make sure that I gave you that context in addition to the context that I gave you from part one. And then that way, when we dive into the affirmations, it will make a whole lot more sense. So I hope that was helpful. Definitely talk back to me. If you have any questions with the points that I gave, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the affirmations. So we have 6 affirmations. I'm going to give you each one and then just give you some insight on each one, just so that way you understand where it comes from. And if it's helpful, definitely make sure to write it down. If you want to use them in a journal, feel free to do that. If you need to change the language at all, make sure to change the language however it makes sense to you. That's perfectly okay. And then, again, use them however you want to. So use them in your journal. If you want to write them down on sticky notes and post them wherever you want to post them. If you want to record yourself saying them, feel free to do that, because that's a great way to kind of get it, in your spirit. And if you, again, need to change language, change the tone, so that way it's more true for you, then do that. I know that a lot of times people just take affirmations and they just use them as they are, but sometimes the language may not resonate, or may not even it just may not even be how you speak. So if you don't speak that way, if it's words that you're not quite sure of, or don't really use, or don't understand, feel free to change it. This isn't the end all be all. And make sure to like the live, make sure to share it. If you know anyone that needs any help when it comes to exploring their feelings and their emotions and understanding them, definitely make sure to share the live out. Really, I would appreciate it. So affirmation number 1. Yes, affirmation number 1. My thoughts are filled with positivity, confidence, and optimism. My thoughts are filled with positivity, confidence, and optimism. I'm going to say them 3 times, y'all. That's how we get it up here. My thoughts are filled with positivity, confidence, and optimism. So, and what does optimism mean, right? Seeing the bright side, being hopeful, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and shifting your thought process to those 3 things: positivity, confidence, and optimism. And a lot of times our negative thoughts overpower us because we lack confidence. So this is the start. My thoughts are filled with positivity, confidence, and optimism. So when it comes to the number 2 is I release all negative thoughts and embrace them as a temporal experience. I release all negative thoughts and embrace them as a temporal experience. So, and I'll repeat that 3rd time. I release all negative thoughts and embrace them as a temporal experience. So with that, this is not completely ridding your negative thoughts, right? So just thinking about the fact that this isn't about you just getting completely rid of all of your negative thoughts, and that they will never appear, that they will never come, and that one day I will never have experienced a negative thought in my life. That is not an expectation that we should have here. Negative thoughts are going to come. It's impossible for them not to come, right? We're human and we're in this life with a human experience, and negativity is a part of that experience. So this isn't about getting rid of it completely. It's about monitoring and understanding what they are versus what they tell you they are, if that makes sense. So your emotions may tell you that this is happening, and that this is the scenario, and that this is the perception, and that this is what it is. Whereas it could be a false narrative. It could be your perception, right? Based off of what we were talking about earlier. So understanding that just because you experience an emotion, it doesn't mean that there's truth behind it. It just means that that's what you're experiencing at that time. So it's not about getting rid of it. It's not about trying to remove your negative, thoughts or negative experiences completely. It's just about awareness and becoming more aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and how you're behaving. So that way, when it comes to making changes and adjustments and reframing how you think, you can do that. But you can't do that without the awareness. So that's what it is. I release all negative thoughts and embrace them as a temporal experience. Releasing those negative thoughts, they will come, but releasing them. And then understanding that it's temporary. All emotions are temporary, whether they're negative or positive. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad. Sometimes you're mad, sometimes you're glad. Sometimes you're joyful, sometimes you're surprised. Sometimes you're anxious. Sometimes it comes and goes, and it comes and goes instantly. You ever go through a situation where you were so angry and then someone said something that made it click for you, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. Right? So your emotions can change in an instant. So a lot of times we make permanent decisions based off of temporary experiences. And this is a way for you to really think about, okay, is this really what's happening? Is this really what I'm feeling? And if it is, why am I feeling that way? So taking it a step further, instead of thinking of your emotions as being the end all be all, right? So that's number 2. Number 3, I am in control of my thoughts, and I choose to take ownership of my emotional well-being. I am in control of my thoughts, and I choose to take ownership of my emotional well-being. I'll say that one last time. I am in control of my thoughts, and I choose to take ownership of my emotional well-being. So you have the ability to change how you think by reframing how you think, right? So instead of I'm sad, right? Because a lot of times we even claim these things as being who we are, right? I am sad. Think about what you're saying. I am this. Instead of saying I am experiencing sadness, right? So I'm saying to myself, I am sad. So, okay, I am sad. But if I say to myself, oh, I'm experiencing sadness, it will pass. This is how I'm feeling right now. That's a different perspective, right? So just reframing how you're thinking about your emotions as being an experience versus it being who you are. Saying I am sad, I am depressed, saying things like I am broke. Those just kind of like thinking about how you're stating those thoughts, and how you're stating those thoughts in here, as well as how you're stating those thoughts out loud. So you have the ability to change how you think by reframing. Instead of I am sad, and experiencing sadness, and then also thinking about the things and the thoughts that you're dwelling on the most, the things that you do, the instant replay that you play over and over and over again, and it just has a continuous loop. And really thinking about what you're spending your time thinking, your most of the time thinking on. You can do this by journaling, just like as things are coming to mind, just start writing things down and then looking back at like what you were actually thinking during these times. That could be tedious, but even just doing that for like one day is like a very helpful thing. So that way you have like a clear understanding, like, oh my gosh, these are the things that I've been thinking, and this area here is something that I think about often. Let me be intentional about changing that. So that was number 3. I am in control of my thoughts and I choose to take ownership of my emotional well-being. Number 4. I hope this is all making sense, by the way. I can pause. I hope this is making sense. I hope this is helpful. Please let me know in the comments. Make sure to like the live, hit the hearts. So that way I know that you're listening and that it is helpful. Number 4. I speak to myself. Oh, hold on. I speak to myself like someone I love. Everything I tell myself contributes to my emotions. I speak to myself like someone I love. Everything I tell myself contributes to my emotions. I'll say that one more time. I speak to myself like someone I love. Everything I tell myself contributes to my emotions. Watch how you speak to yourself, right? Watch what you're saying to yourself. A lot of times we're experiencing a lot of negative emotions because we talk to us like we trash. Like we talk to ourselves like we are trash. And the things that we say to ourselves and how we talk about ourselves in our minds is nothing that you would say out loud to another person, especially someone you love, right? So this is just a reminder to speak to yourself like someone you love, and understanding that everything that you tell yourself contributes to your emotions. So if you have a lot of negative self-talk, then that's contributing to why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And it's also primarily contributing to how you're feeling about yourself, right? So if you are constantly telling yourself you're not smart, constantly telling yourself that you do dumb things, or constantly telling yourself that you can't do something, then that's what's going to flow throughout your body, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. That's what's going to flow, and that's how you're going to respond to things, and that's how your emotions are going to respond to things. So you may be in a situation where, imposter syndrome is an example where you talk to yourself, talk down to yourself, tell yourself you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, and all of these things, and then wonder why you're experiencing imposter syndrome, where you aren't confident at work, or you're in a situation where you just feel like you're not good enough and you consistently feel that way. There's a reason for that. The reason is primarily how you speak to yourself. So this is just a reminder that speak to yourself like someone you love, and understand that everything you tell yourself, every line that you say to yourself every day contributes to your emotions. And if you find yourself consistently depressed or consistently sad or overwhelmed or burned out often, think about how you speak to yourself. Because most likely, I can almost guarantee that if you're experiencing those types of emotions, anxiety is another one. Like if you have heavy anxiety, if you're experiencing a lot of those emotions, I can guarantee that it contributes to how you talk to yourself in your mind. So thinking about that, being cognizant of that's something that's not going to change overnight, because most likely it's something that you developed in childhood, where you started speaking to yourself in that way, whether it was an environmental factor where someone was talking to you in that way and you adapted that thought process, or it's something, or an anxiety that has built up within you over time from a traumatic experience or a trigger of some sort. So really take into consideration of how you speak to you, what you tell you every day. And if those things are majority negative, that may be why it's impacting your emotions surrounding sadness, depression, and anxiety, and like all of those things. Me being someone that has heavy anxiety, that I'm not even gonna claim that, has experience. See, we learning, right? Has experienced high levels of anxiety, and in that have found that a lot of it was related back to how I speak to myself and self-doubt, and just telling myself things that aren't true. So keep that in mind. That was number 4. I speak to myself with someone I love. Everything I tell myself contributes to my emotions. Number 5, I replace doubts with confidence and fears with courage. I replace doubts with confidence and fears with courage. I'll say that a third time. I replace doubts with confidence and fears with courage. Challenge your thoughts. Challenge your thoughts actively, intentively. Really challenge the things that you're thinking, especially those negative thoughts, right? Challenge every thought, of course, right? Sometimes it's not even just negative thoughts. It may just be, positive thoughts. If you're thinking, and I'll give you an example of a positive thought that you want to challenge. So, like, say if someone asked you, how are you doing? And initially, you know for a fact that you're not doing well, but then your second thought is, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. And that's what you say. That's something you want to challenge, even though it's a positive thought, right? Like, oh, intentionally, okay, I'm fine, I'm good. That's a positive thought. Like, why would I challenge that? Because that may not be the truth. You truly may not be feeling well. You may truly be not in the best state. You may truly not be okay. So challenging your thoughts doesn't necessarily have to be negative ones. It could be those positive thoughts, that toxic positivity, right? Where you're just trying to be positive, knowing that there's something that's underlining. There's a silver line from being positive and being optimistic and really thinking, outside of the box creatively when it comes to your situations, and or being just toxically positive and being in the clouds and dismissing what you're feeling and your emotions, whether they be negative or positive. So thinking about and ensuring to challenge your thoughts and be active about it and be intentional about it. And it's something that you do every day. Being intentional, especially if you're trying to shift and reframe how you're thinking. So challenge your thoughts, challenge them actively, be intentional, but also be compassionate for you and understanding that this isn't going to change overnight. Have compassion for yourself, have that self-compassion, and give yourself grace in those areas where you're struggling and where you're being very frustrated in those instances. That's the time to pull back. Like, hey, okay, I know that I don't want to beat myself up here, but I want to do this in a gradual time frame, because depending on how old you are, right? If you've lived a life in a certain way, like I'm 37, like if I lived a life for 37 years and I'm trying to reframe how I think, it's not going to happen overnight. You know what I mean? You've had all of those 30 some years to get to this point where you understand how you're thinking isn't the best way. And now you're trying to reframe it, but you're trying to reframe it in 6 months. Like, no, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen over time. It's going to be gradual. You'll look up one day and you're like, oh, I actually handled this differently. Or, oh, I'm a little bit more content in this situation, whereas last year I probably wouldn't have been. So it's going to be a gradual experience. It's going to be something that you have to have compassion for. You have to be, again, active, intentional, but also understand that it takes time. That's number 5. Number 6, this was the last one. I treat my mind as a sanctuary of peace and inspiration. I treat my mind as a sanctuary of peace and inspiration. One last time. I treat my mind as a sanctuary of peace and inspiration. So stay inspired. I mean, no point intended. Haven inspired. Whatever. But stay inspired. Stay encouraged. and do it intentionally. Um, Guard your heart, protect your heart, and protect your minds. Be super, super duper hyper protective of what you consume, right? So this is where a lot of action has to take into consideration. You have to be really protective about what you consume when you're trying to explore like what these emotions are and what you're feeling. I always suggest that if it's something that you really, really want to dig into deeper, to seek professional assistance with this, with a therapist, or if a mindfulness coach or whatever, feel free to do that. But I feel like depending on how much exploration you have to do with this, a therapist would be ideal. But understanding that you have to protect what you consume. They always say, what you eat is what you become, but also what you read is what you become. What you watch is what you become. What you listen to is what you become. What you talk about is what you become. So it all is in there. In addition to what you eat is what you become. So just take that into consideration when thinking about your thoughts. And if you want your thoughts to be consistent with joy and peace and inspiration and all of these things, you have to take into consideration what you're consuming, right? And the Bible talks about how, what you consume or what you take in flows from the heart. And if you're consistently taking in trash, if you're consistently watching things that are not positive, if you're consistently listening to things, especially music, like take into consideration the music that you're listening to. Really listen to the words and think about, even though it's something you may like the beat, but like, what is this professing over you? What is this talking about, to the point where you're ingesting it? Just like music can make you happy and make you excited and get you going for the day and get you through your workout and all of those things, it can also make you sad. It can also make you depressed. It can also have a lot of things attached to it that can bring down your spirit, to the point where you're experiencing emotions that you've never experienced before. You're experiencing thoughts that you've never experienced before, or it's bringing those things back up for you. So really think about what you're reading, what you're watching, what you're listening to, and what you're talking about. What conversations you're entertaining, what people you're entertaining. Because if you shift those things, if you physically just shift those things, and take even a step back from friendships that that aren't good for you, or relationships that that are not good for you, and taking a step back from those things and really evaluating what you're consuming, you'll be very surprised as to what it is. And just making these few little tweaks here and there could make a difference on how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what your behaviors are. So I hope this was helpful. I went through all 6. I'll go through and just read them off really quickly again, just for anyone that's missed. Number 1 was, my thoughts are filled with positivity, confidence, and optimism. Number 2, I release all negative thoughts and embrace them as a temporal experience. Number 3, I am in control of my thoughts and I choose to take ownership of my emotional well-being. Number 4, I speak to myself like someone I love. Everything I tell myself contributes to my emotions. Number 5, I replace doubts with confidence and fears with courage. And number 6, I treat my mind as a sanctuary of peace and inspiration. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that this gives you some insight to your feelings and your emotions, and helping you understand your emotions. If you have any questions about what we talked about, definitely make sure to drop those questions in the comments. I'll definitely make sure to get those answers to you. And if you didn't watch part 1, go back and watch part 1. The link is in this video, so you can always go back and watch part 1, where we talked about the actual types of emotions and feelings. So definitely go back for that. And then if you are even just talking about negative self-talk and all of that, if you haven't seen already, you can check out my book. It's called Nah Self, Let Me Be Great. You can purchase it on Amazon. It is a self-doubt, inspiration, and workbook. Actually, I think hold on, I might have one here. Yes, I do. So you can grab it off of Amazon. It's called Nah Self, Let Me Be Great. It talks about my experience with self-doubt and then has a workbook for you to talk through your own experiences. There's affirmations in there, there's levity, it's fun, it's a short read, but also just has like where you'll be able to evaluate yourself throughout the process. And I want to say there are, how many chapters? I want to say there's 8 chapters. Yeah, so it's a very short read. Definitely grab those. The link is down in the comments. And then also too, you can grab the journal. So like if you're not a reader, some people just aren't a reader, they just want a journal. This is just an empty journal where you can go through the prompts of weekly check-ins and morning inspiration. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about the books, definitely let me know in the comments as well. Otherwise, you all have a great rest of your day. These lives are typically on Mondays. Let me know in the comments if Tuesday works better. We'll see. But yeah, I love you all. You all have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.